It's with great pleasure that I welcome back Dr. Sean Patel, who's the CEO and founder of Prep Expert, the title sponsor of the College Admissions Process podcast. Sean, you have a special message for the listeners?
Hey, John, I just wanted to mention for all the parents and students who are listening to this great podcast, we have a really special offer only for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast for Prep Expert. So, if your student is going to be taking an online SAT, ACT, PSAT course anytime soon, or is looking for one-on-one tutoring with top 1% tutors, head over to prepexpert.com. We offer live online courses for every college admissions exam. On top of that, we have the best score guarantees, best curriculum, and best instructors in the test prep industry. And just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast, you can get 20% off any online SAT or PSAT or ACT course, as well as one-on-one tutoring. So you can get 20% off. Just make sure you use the promo code College Talk. That's one word, College Talk, and you'll get 20% off just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast. And I hope you guys can use that to your advantage, save a bunch of money at prepexpert.com.
Thank you so much, Sean. And to everyone out there, once again, that promo code is College Talk. That's one word, College Talk. Thank you all, and best wishes. Welcome to the CAP, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante. Welcome to the CAP, the College Admissions Process podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Captain Drew Behnke, who's the Director of Admissions at the United States Coast Guard Academy. We're also joined by Katherine Fainer, who's the Deputy Director of Admissions, also at the United States Coast Guard Academy. Captain Behnke, Katherine, thank you so much for being here today. How are you both doing?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having us, John.
Yeah, appreciate it, John. Can't wait. Thanks a lot for inviting us over.
It truly is my honor and pleasure. I've been trying to get you guys on for a long time, and finally we met in NACAC, and here we are recording for all the listeners out there. So being that there's two of you, what we'll do is we'll go back and forth in terms of who's going to answer each question. We're going to start with you, Captain Behnke. The Coast Guard Academy has a distinct mission to develop leaders of character who are ready to serve immediately upon graduation. In your view, Captain, what kind of student truly thrives here?
So that's a great question, John. And when I think about like I've been in the Coast Guard for about 26 years, and I mentor kids and stuff now these days, and I call them kids at the Coast Guard Academy, but like, young adults. So what I think about really is when I think about the students who really thrive at the Academy, they're the ones who are energized by purpose. They want to serve, not someday, but right away. And they're curious, they're resilient, and generally eager to be part of something bigger than themselves. Academically, they've challenged themselves, right? Because you have to be out there. You can't just be doing the remedial work. You have to really go out there and try to get the highest, hardest courses you can take, especially in math and science, because our curriculum is very demanding. But beyond grades, they're the young people who lean into responsibility, who work well on teams, and who can adapt when things get tough. They embrace a structured, immersive environment and see challenge not as a barrier, but as an opportunity to grow. Unlike when I first came out, I wasn't really into the structured environment. I think Ensign Behnke or Cadet Behnke could have used a little bit more of that structure right away, but I grew into it, the person that made me today, right? And lastly, we have physical readiness also matters, even more so today with many of our applicants. They realize that, right? If you arrive physically unprepared, it becomes much, much harder to concentrate on the academic and the military and the leadership demands that all hit you all at once, right? And so being physically ready is something fully within your control and before you show up. So make sure you're dedicating your time to your physical and just your mental, well-being. And it directly supports your ability to handle everything else. Students who come in with a solid fitness foundation, mental toughness, and resilience to push through the tough days, and they tend to thrive here, right? And in the end, the students who flourish are those who combine purpose-driven motivation with preparation, adaptability, and willingness to grow. And because that's our mission, and we demand it from our commissioned officers right upon graduation.
Well, we really appreciate that, Captain. And by the way, thank you so much for your service. And I love what you said. You're looking for students who are energized by purpose. And certainly at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, they're definitely serving our country and providing a lot of purpose. So, Captain, we're going to turn to you now. Families are often surprised to learn that, unlike West Point or the Naval Academy, applicants don't need a congressional nomination. Can you explain why the Coast Guard has a different admissions model and how that shapes the way you evaluate candidates? More broadly, how is the Academy different from both the traditional college and other service academies?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a question we get all the time, John. Something that one of the first questions that people have, and the Coast Guard Academy has never used a congressional nomination process, and that's because we're a different scale, we're a different type of institution. A lot of students might not realize that schools like West Point or the Naval Academy are almost 4 times the size of the Coast Guard Academy. Our incoming freshman class is about 270 cadets. It's a small scale, and we don't necessarily need the support of those congressional nominations to find the caliber and quality of student that we're looking for. We have the ability, because we're working on that smaller scale, to really identify on our own and through a wide network of admissions volunteers. We have over 1,000 people across the country who help to support our recruitment efforts. And so we're able to find the type of students from all walks of life, from all different backgrounds through that process of recruitment and support. And it also removes a barrier for students. There are a lot of really qualified, really capable students out there who might not have the family or the school that has the knowledge and expertise to support them through a congressional nomination process. They might not have connections to a congressperson or a senator, and that process starts a lot earlier than our process starts, because those students need to know in their sophomore year of high school that they're going to be pursuing a congressional nomination, because those can start in the spring of their junior year. And if they find out in the summer before senior year that a service academy or pursuing that type of a career is something that they want to do, it's oftentimes too late for those students, and they're missing out on an opportunity that could really be an incredible fit for them. And so we're able to kind of pull in some of those students who otherwise might not be able to pursue the service that they're really looking for. And, it just gives us the flexibility to build the best class for our service. We also have a different mission than the other academies. We're a humanitarian mission. We're looking to protect and serve, but also to rescue those in danger, those in harm. And so it's just a very unique opportunity and a unique environment. And so not being constrained by the congressional nomination process really allows us flexibility in our recruitment.
Well, we really appreciate the overview, and you talked a little bit about your mission and a lot about service. And we're going to go back to you, Captain Behnke. Service, of course, is central to the Coast Guard experience. How do you assess whether a candidate is genuinely ready to take on that responsibility and the lifestyle?
That's a great question, John. I wish I had a crystal ball, but I think but we have to go through our admissions gaps and what we have that's in front of us. And so I think the biggest thing that we always think about is service isn't just something that we talk about here. It's the entire reason we exist. And I think it's that's something really you need to, as an applicant, you really have to think about. It's the whole reason we're here to serve others, right? I mean, we're a humanitarian service. We always talk about we get to save lives, not take lives, compared to our Department of War or Department of Defense, which are both like necessary, services, but we get that opportunity to serve others, and we're out there as being the public face, right? So when I'm evaluating a candidate's readiness, I'm looking for evidence that they understand what it means to commit themselves to others, not to themselves, right? That shows up in different ways. Leadership roles, sustained community service, involvement in challenging activities like sports or scouts, jobs that require maturity. There's a lot of folks out there that are working and they can't go into like, sporting activities because they're trying to support the family at home. So that shows a lot to us as well, right? Or even family responsibilities that have shaped their character. In their essays and interviews, I'm listening for sincerity above all, right? And are they really sincere about what they're talking about? Do they understand the realities of military service, or is it just something they've seen on TV? So I mean, do they understand what it means to sacrifice yourself? And not just for the prestige of attending the academy, right? And that's why I always think about, like, oh, I'm going here, but like, do you understand what is involved? Afterwards. We also look closely at resilience. Our cadets face academic rigor, military structure, and significant physical demands. Someone who has already pushed through adversity, learned from failure, and grown through challenge is usually well prepared for the lifestyle here. So when I came out of, from a personal experience, when I came out of high school, I was thinking I was completely ready for whatever the academy could throw at me. My older brother went to the Naval Academy and was 4 years older than me. So I saw him, mature. So I was like, oh, I can get this lick. I'm better than Dave. There's no problem. I can do this, right? I was the salutatorian of my class, and it was a pretty big class, right? I played 4 sports. I was captain of 2 of them, and I juggled a handful of clubs. And I thought I had everything handled, and the hard work and even failure. I've gone through it. I can persevere. Man, was I humbled when I showed up at the academy, because guess what? Everybody's a salutatorian. Everybody's like, high achieving, somebody. So I'm just like one of many. And I realized that what I thought was failure in high school wasn't even close. It was here that I learned that, what real failure felt like. And more importantly, I think what it actually means to get back up and keep going. The point is, we're not trying to find the perfect students, not at all. We're looking for those who can handle adversity, push through barriers, and keep moving forward, especially when things get tough.
Definitely, and things will get tough. And I love how you really dug deeper in terms of your mission and philosophy. You said service is the entire reason why we exist. Students, you get to save lives and serve others. So you made that very clear, Catherine. We appreciate that. And going back to Catherine, in recent years, what trends have you noticed in the applicant pool, whether in volume, academic preparation, or students' understanding of service?
Yeah, John, I mean, you talk to all, different people in all corners of the admissions world. And I think similar to what I'm sure you're hearing from them, in the past several years, we've definitely seen a bit of a decline in our number of applicants, the number of inquiries. And part of that is demographic, right? We all know about the demographic changes and the number of students out there. But one of the unique challenges that we face is that there's been a significant decline in what we talk about as propensity to serve, right? And so there are surveys out there where they survey the youth within the country, people from different age brackets, and asking, what is the likelihood that you could see yourself serving your country? And as of right now, only about 11% of youth say they definitely or probably serve, right? So when we think about the college going population who are looking at elite institutions, whether that be a Harvard or an MIT or any incredible schools across the country, there's a select amount of students who can get into one of those institutions. But for us, it's not just about that academic preparation. It's about the willingness and the propensity to serve. And that portion of the population is even smaller. And so that's definitely been a real challenge for us, not just here at the Coast Guard Academy, but the other service academies as well. And there's also a drop in confidence levels, especially among young women. One thing that we've been really proud of here at the Coast Guard Academy is that we've had the highest proportion of female students compared with many of the other service academies. And it's something that we, really take pride in, that we have a really good representation across the board. But right now, a recent survey shows that only about 8% of young women believe they could succeed in the military, compared to with about 26% of young men. And so we don't want to lose ground with the women in this country who have been strengthening and enriching our service, because we know that they bring so much to the table. And we want to make sure that the officers that we are producing at the Coast Guard Academy are reflective of our country at large, both, male and female, but, across socioeconomic divides as well. So it's definitely been a challenge as we see the decline in interest in service. Yes, but another challenge that we face is the rise of medical disqualifiers. One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that it's not just enough to be academically qualified or physically fit. Students have to go through a whole medical qualification process as well to make sure that they're medically able to serve. And things like mental health challenges, physical fitness, those can be medically disqualifying. And with national youth health trends, mental health issues being on the rise, that's a challenge we're seeing as well, and it's very different from what other colleges face. But we want to make sure that the students who are going to serve our country are ready in all those different ways. But there is good news. The students who are applying and who express an interest, they're very self-selecting and they tend to have really done their homework. The students who apply to the Coast Guard Academy know what lies ahead, at least for the most part, they do. They are drawn to STEM. Their academic preparation is there. So we still have a really strong interest and strong outlook for us. So even while the pool may be tightening, the commitment and the quality of the students who lean in remains incredibly high.
Well, it's definitely a huge commitment, and I didn't even think about exactly that. It's not only the physical health, but the mental health in terms of your overall review. And you mentioned that 11% of youth indicated that they would definitely or probably serve. And I also didn't know that only 8% of women believe that they could be successful in military service compared to 26% of young men. So we really appreciate that information, Katherine. And families often hear the term institutional priorities, but it can be confusing. So, Katherine, beyond just filling a class, and you mentioned that there's about 270 cadets, but beyond filling that class, what priorities most influence admissions decisions at the Coast Guard Academy?
Yeah, so institutional priorities, John, are always really important. I've worked at several other colleges, and that's always something I'm thinking about as a college admissions professional. But ours goes beyond just the needs of the Coast Guard Academy. We're also thinking about producing future officers and the officer corps that's going to be the future of the Coast Guard as a service. Our goal is to graduate 100% of our students, and they're all commissioning as officers into the Coast Guard. And so we're not just thinking about our students who are here for 4 years, we're thinking about our future employees of the U.S. Coast Guard. And so we're thinking not just institutional priorities such as producing Division III athletes at the NCAA level, filling our STEM courses, making sure that we have the right students who are future leaders, who show initiative and teamwork, but we're looking for people who can successfully lead within the Coast Guard after graduation. And so it's definitely a different set of priorities that we're thinking about, because we're not just thinking about what are they doing for these 4 years. We're looking for the 5-year commitment that they have beyond graduation, and hopefully to Coast Guard officers who make a career out of being in the Coast Guard. Captain Behnke mentioned he's been in the Coast Guard for 26 years. And actually, John, my older brother is also a graduate of the Coast Guard Academy, class of 2009, and he's still serving in the Coast Guard today as well. And so we're thinking about down the road, how are the students that we're selecting going to positively impact the service and the safety and success of our country for years to come. And so we're making sure that our institutional priorities also reflect that of the officer corps and what we need as a service to be successful.
Well, such great insight and a tremendous responsibility. And I love that. You're looking not only to admit students, but you're really looking at the future of the Coast Guard, which I think is just tremendous. Thank you so much for that overview, Katherine. And Captain Behnke, the Academy does a holistic review, but transcripts are still a critical piece. When your team reviews a student's transcript, what do you look for beyond the GPA?
Right, and that's still where we're at in all the missions world, right? And there's no AI bots that are going to just select folks out there. There's no dartboard that we just throw to people ask me that every day. You just have a giant dartboard and you just throw at it, right? We get these transcripts, and that's what you have to read and you have to suffice through. And we do interviews and things like that, but it's definitely a piece that we have to go through. So I always say a transcript, it tells a story. And yes, GPA matters, of course. It is a number. It's something that you work through for 4 years, but it does matter. But what I'm really looking at are the choices a student made and the trajectory that they're on, right? And so are they going up? Are they going down? Are they staying status quo? Are they challenging themselves where they're there? GPA gives me a snapshot, right? That's all really it is. But the transcript tells me how a student got there and whether they're ready for the academic demands of what the academy is. If we just let you slide through and you haven't challenged yourself, you will be challenged here and you will be out on the street, within 6 months. You will not make it through here. It's very challenging, but it's challenging for a purpose too, right? So things that I pay attention to. First, I look at the course rigor. We're a STEM-heavy institution. Everyone graduates with a Bachelor of Science. Whether you're going to be a government major or management major, you still have to take those core STEM classes in order to graduate to get your Bachelor of Science degree. And the service has an increasing need for officers with backgrounds in engineering, cyber, computer science, and the sciences. So I'm paying close attention to whether a student challenged themselves in the most demanding math and science courses their school had to offer, i.e. calculus, chemistry, physics, and upper-level STEM coursework. We receive our command signals emphasizing that the future of the Coast Guard missions require officers with strong analytical and technical skills. So the foundation really matters, what we set them up for. So the second part that I look for trends. Are grades improving? Did the student take more challenging classes junior or senior year? A positive trajectory tells me they're ready for the jump into an academic intensity that we have here at the academy. And if there's a dip, I'm looking for the context in that dip. Was there something going on that semester? Did someone pass away at home? What is the context behind that dip? Were they simply not studying, right? And also, were they taking on more rigors with sports and stuff? And could they handle that? So if they couldn't juggle that, well, guess what? You're going to get even more demands on you when you come to the academy. So maybe you might need another year, self-preparation to get you ready to be mature to be able to handle all of that workload. Another thing I look at, did they rebound? It's okay to fail, right? I mean, as long as it's not catastrophic, right? It's good to see. And did you come back from it? And that's what we want to see, that resilience. So do they rebound? That resilience is very, very important at the academy. Third, I look at course selection and consistency. Do the students stay committed to rigorous coursework across all 4 years? When we select our incoming cohorts, we specifically seek students who intend to stay within the academic school they select. So I want to see patterns that reinforce that they are ready for a major that they're leaning toward, right? So I don't want to see someone who's just skipping around a lot. And our provost, I think, would like that too, right? You come into a major and to be an engineering school, we like you to stay within that schoolhouse, like jumping out to a different major, right? And then finally, I pay attention to what the transcript says about habits. Things like attendance, course withdrawals, or whether they followed through on their commitments. Those small details help me understand maturity and readiness, not just the, academic ability that they have. So in short, I'm looking at rigor, trends, resilience, and alignment with the academic expectations of the Coast Guard Academy. Not perfection, but potential and preparation. I also look for context. Different schools offer different resources. What I want to see is that the student took advantage of the opportunities available to them and has built the academic foundation so they can thrive here.
Well, we really appreciate you pulling the curtain back and giving us some insights in terms of your overall review process. Now, early in your response, you mentioned the interview. Now, I'm assuming that not everyone gets interviewed initially. I would imagine that the applications get reviewed and then whoever makes it to the next round gets the interview, or am I completely wrong, Captain?
So yes and no. So it depends. So to be clear, now our process is maybe not in the past, but 100% of everyone will get interview of some sort. So there's different ways to get interviewed. One, we have our introductory mission. We call it the admissions introductory mission, which is our summer program. If you come to that, that's a full week of interview, right? So we get to interview, we get to see you face to face. If you're a recruited athlete, one of our coaches have obviously interviewed you because they do a write-up on you there. And there's other facets. If you come in for a day, we get to interview and see you face to face. So, and if you're not one of those, and yes, you matriculate through, and we see that we won't give you an appointment until you have been interviewed. So we'll send one of our partners or volunteers or one of our admissions staff will reach out to you. So take that phone call and schedule that with us. But really all we're doing is to try to get another facet, because it's too late when you show up here at the academy and we haven't had eyes on you to really ask you those intense questions, right? And to really see, is mom or dad pressuring you into this? Just blink, at us. If you need help, right? We tried to say, not that anybody does that, right? I'm not saying that we do, but you can kind of read it sometimes in the transcript, right? But I think it's just another avenue, another way to because we're such a small cohort, as Catherine mentioned before, right? 270 folks at is very small. So we kind of need to be very, concise and very targeted and very focused on the folks that we predict. So yes, everybody will get an interview at some point or in some facet. Hopefully that answers your question, John.
It definitely does. And thank you so much for the clarifications and insights. Catherine, I want to come back to you. The teacher recommendations often reveal qualities that don't show up in grades or test scores. What do the strongest letters highlight about a candidate's character, leadership, and readiness for academy life? And what makes a letter less effective?
Yeah, so I would say the best letters are the ones that give us a real insight into the student beyond the numbers, right? We see their high school transcript, we see the grades they've gotten in those courses, but we want to know how they're actually performing. And I would say, in particular, for us here at the Coast Guard Academy, we ask students specifically for a recommendation from a math teacher and from an English teacher. And we do that intentionally because we want to learn about how they perform within those disciplines. And so, one thing that I've noticed as I've reviewed recommendations from those particular teachers is they don't always speak to the student's performance within that discipline. And that's a real missed opportunity for us because, particularly as a school with a strong focus on STEM curriculum, thinking about the types of academic rigor that students are going to have, we know at the college level, regardless of whether it's here at the Coast Guard Academy or elsewhere, that the ability to think critically and strong writing skills is going to be very important. And so when we don't get a clarification from those English and math teachers about the student, we can only make assumptions based on what we see on the transcript. So, my real advice to those teachers would be don't do a rehash of what we're getting from the school counselor because we're getting a more generalized overview of the student from the counselor letter. A really strong English or math recommendation for us is going to specifically speak to how the student can thrive within that particular discipline and what they're going to bring to the table at the college level.
Well, I really love that. And it reminds me that recently I interviewed an admissions representative from a STEM heavy school, and his advice was exactly what you are doing, which is you're requiring a math and an English teacher or somebody from the STEM side, someone from the humanities side, so that hopefully you get that balance looking at, the analytical skills or what it is inside the English class that is not so easily found on the transcript or the activity sheet, but hopefully that teacher is able to convey to you to get a better overall picture of the applicant. So I really love that, Catherine. Thank you for sharing. And you and your team read thousands of essays each year. Catherine, what makes an essay truly stand out versus just checking the box? And are there common themes that feel overused? And what approaches tend to work best when done authentically?
Yeah, so I've always told students at every school that I've worked at that the essay is the one opportunity for me to learn something about them that I can't learn anywhere else in their application. We have their resumes, we have the information that the school counselors want to share, we have their transcript, but the essay is really a place for them to be authentic, to have a representation of who they are and what their goals are. And for us at the Coast Guard Academy, we ask specifically for students to talk about why they want to be here. Captain has alluded to it a few times today that you really need to want this for yourself. And so showing that genuine drive, that determination, giving us an understanding of why the Coast Guard Academy is a right fit for them because it's so unlike any other college experience that they might have. Of course, if they're applying to other service academies, it's a similar environment. And most of the students who apply to us are applying to other service academies as well because they have that propensity to serve. But for us to be able to see that you really have an understanding, or at least believe you know what you're getting yourself into and why this is meaningful to you and why you want to pursue how you can support the service. One thing that I've seen a lot in college essays is a lot of it is internal. It's, I am great. I did this. I did that. But when you're going into a military service, when you're coming to a service academy, we also want to know how you are going to be for others, how you can be of service to others, and how you can think about things outside of yourself and how what you do impacts others and not just about how wonderful you are and why you are such a wonderful fit to the academy. And so I think if I had one piece of advice for students, it's think about how you are going to, leave your mark, but in a way that's not so much about you, but about the greater good and the people that you want to serve and support.
Well, I really love that response because when we talk about traditional colleges, we're always giving students advice to use your authentic voice, which we want to do here as well. But for a traditional college, it's all about you students, who you are, your personality. Now, that also rings true for the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, but you also want students to talk about how they are going to be of service to others. So it's not just about you, but how you're going to serve others, which I think is a nice distinction to point out there for students, of course, applying to the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. Now, Katherine, unlike most colleges, students apply to the Coast Guard Academy through its own system, not the common application. So can you walk us through how the application differs and how the structure helps your team understand the candidate more fully?
Absolutely, John. So, our application process is pretty similar to a traditional application, just in terms of the overall functionality. We have an application portal, students can track their progress, but it's built specifically for the Coast Guard Academy, and it allows us to ask questions that truly matter for service. To dig a little bit deeper into the things that we need to know about a student to highlight how they could be a good fit for the Coast Guard Academy. We also have slightly different requirements, things like the medical process I talked about earlier, the medical qualification. We have a physical fitness test that students need to take as part of their application. So it's not a one size fits all platform similar to the Common App. And I think the other thing that really is important is, John, I'm sure as you've worked with students are applying to more and more colleges each year. And it's great that the Common App has made it possible for students to try out different colleges, apply to different schools, but it's also ballooned the number of schools that students are applying to. And I think having a little bit of friction for students to have to take that one extra step and apply through our application system just emphasizes their level of seriousness. There are a lot of extra steps that they have to take, and being able to take that one extra step to say, I'm going to go to your application, I'm going to fill it out for you, it just helps them to really, I think, start to process the fact that this process is not the same as all those schools on the Common Application. And I love the Common Application. I've used it at many other colleges, but this is such a unique environment. I think it helps to get students right from the start into that mindset that this is going to be a different process. But if you're dedicated to it and you take it seriously, it's one that's going to be incredibly rewarding. And, we don't charge an application fee. Students don't have to pay to apply. So there's no barrier to entry in that way. And I think it still allows the opportunity to be open to students from all walks of life. But it just helps us to know that the students who are applying are a little bit more serious. They're a little bit more sure that this is a place that they want to apply to, and then helps us to tailor that application to our needs within the Coast Guard Academy.
Well, such great insights. And of course, unlike on the Common Application where you could apply to multiple schools, this is a separate application. So to your point, it's really showing, or the students are really showing, that they are absolutely serious about coming to the Coast Guard Academy. Now, Katherine, your application has its own version of the additional information section. What kinds of context or details do applicants include here that make their application stronger?
So I think I talked about this a little bit when we talked about essays, but I think that context is really important. And Another thing that I've always shared with applicants is I only know what I see on this piece of paper. Now, of course, we take the time to interview students and get to know them more. And through that summer program that Captain Behnke mentioned, we get to interact with them and get to know them. But still, we only know what we see in front of us when we're reading that application. And so that additional information section is really the student's last chance to give us any context that really matters. So things like family responsibilities, medical challenges, or school disruptions that they might have faced. We have a lot of students who apply who have parents who are in the military and may have moved 5 to 10 times already at 17 years old. And so the resilience that that takes to be able to start over again and again in a new place and adapt, that's helpful information for us when we're trying to get to understand a student. So it's really just a place where they can give us any information that's not found elsewhere in their application and to really help us to understand why they feel that they are a right fit for the Coast Guard Academy. It's not a place to repeat their resume. We get that from students. We don't require a resume, but most students will submit one. So it's really just that additional context to help us understand where they're coming from and how their background influences what they're bringing to the table as a candidate for the Academy.
Hey, podcast friends, if you've been enjoying the College Admissions Process podcast, I'm excited to share my new book, Straight from the Admissions Office, Insider Strategies for College Applications. It's packed with insights and tips from over 250 podcast episodes with admissions professionals designed to make the college process less overwhelming. Whether you're a student, parent, or college counselor, it's a valuable resource for navigating the admissions process. By grabbing a copy, you're also helping to support the podcast. The links are in the show notes. Thank you, and best wishes to all with the college admissions process. Such great advice. And so students, it's really important to look at the overall application, all of the pieces that make up that marketing package, which we call, of course, the college application. And if there are any missing pieces where you need to give more context, use that space so that you're creating a full picture of who you are. Because remember, the admissions representatives, they really are strangers. They're going to get to know you. They're going to interview you. But in reality, they are strangers. And so anything that you leave out, you're leaving it to them to speculate. And when they have to speculate about something, it usually doesn't work out in the student's favor. So again, look at the overall package. Anything that's missing, anything that needs explanation, use that additional information section. So we appreciate that, Katherine. And on the activities and achievement side, Katherine, what catches your eye as truly meaningful when candidates highlight their experiences?
So I think for us, we're not focused on the number of activities that a student has been involved in. I think a lot of students today who are applying to college feel like they need to have a laundry list of activities to show that they are well-rounded. But for us, what really stands out is sustained involvement and students who have dedicated themselves over a long period of time to a pursuit. Because as we've mentioned throughout the conversation, a student is not just committing to 4 years of college, they are committing to 5 years of service beyond that. And that is a sustained pursuit that is going to take growth. It's going to take grit, determination. And so when we can see a student who has shown an interest in something for a long period of time that really sticks to a particular pursuit, maybe they've taken on leadership roles within that, whether that be a captain of a sports team or president of a club. Maybe they helped revitalize or start an organization, someone who does service projects. We also, in looking for that propensity to serve, students who've had some sort of exposure to either a service organization, maybe they do JROTC at their high school, maybe they've done scouting, maybe they do community service within a youth group at their parish or at their church. All of those different things help us to understand that student's commitment and how they dedicate themselves to a particular activity. So for us, it's for sure quality over quantity. And we're wanting to see that they are not just able to lead, that they can follow, that they're a good teammate, because all of those qualities are going to be really important when it comes to being a successful cadet and eventually a successful officer.
Well, that's great insight, Katherine. Thank you so much. Captain Behnke, we're going to come back to you. Physical fitness is a required part of the application, as was mentioned earlier. Beyond simply passing an assessment, how should students prepare to ensure they're set up to succeed once they arrive on campus?
Start running now, right? So I mean, I think the big thing that you're entering the military, you're entering your chance of service, right? So physical fitness is a way of life, and physical fitness isn't just an admissions requirement for us; it's the core expectation of military service. And like I said, and the expectation continues and continues to grow. Right now, the Coast Guard, we are in a, I think it's a good front. Like we're changing that. We normally would just do weigh-ins, or you would do that for the Coast Guard, like for our assessment. All Coast Guard officers, once you graduate, and everybody, our enlisted corps has to take a physical fitness assessment. So it's not just at the academy. You're going to be taking it just like the other services do, to make sure that we're maintaining our physical growth. So with that being said, across the force, senior defense leaders have been very, very clear on this. Readiness is national security, and services are sharpening their focus on ensuring that our men and women in uniform are at their top physical condition. The bar is rising every day, not just at the service academies, but in the operational workforce as well. Because of that, fitness should never be viewed as a one-time benchmark. So just you want to get that goal, you should always be trying to get your best, right? Always looking for your personal best. It's a daily discipline and professional obligation. Students should build sustained habits early, consistent running, strength and endurance training, mobility work, and exercising in group settings to mirror, the team environments that they'll operate in as cadets and as future officers. We're also seeing this reality reflected in the Corps itself. Roughly about 68% of our cadets participate in either a varsity team or a high-level competitive club sport. That is different compared to other service academies, a lot larger one, which generally only about 20% of their corps are like in a varsity or high-level competition. So come here, we need you, right? We have a small corps, so we want you like playing in some kind of competitive environment. It doesn't have to be on one of our varsity teams, but we definitely want you to facilitate, into that competitive environment. And that percentage has been steadily growing and increasing, year after year. This tells us two things, right? Students who are already live an athletic lifestyle transition more smoothly here because they're conditioned for physical tempo and teamwork expectations. And the second thing it teaches us is that the competitive standard within the Corps is definitely rising, driven by cadets who arrive with strong athletic backgrounds and who continue pursuing high performance training while they're on campus. We actually had we do an exchange program with the other service academies, and our superintendent got to go visit some of the West Pointers that were here visiting, and he got to go back and talk. And they said they're not on varsity teams themselves, but they said they really enjoyed the camaraderie and the chance to compete while at the Coast Guard Academy in a different high-level club activity. And so it's not every day they're just working on their own physical fitness, but they're working in a team to successfully for a goal, right? And being a small cohort, we strive for that, for those physical readiness goals, right? So the cadets who show up in good shape are at a significant advantage, I feel. They can focus more on their academics, their leadership development, and adapting to the military environment rather than struggling, just to meet the minimum physical standards. Those who arrive unprepared often feel the strain rippled into their sleep, their recovery, and stress, and their overall performance. So the bottom line, treat fitness as a lifestyle and a leadership expectation, not as a test. In today's military climate, where readiness and physical performance are increasingly emphasized, from basic training through the highest levels of the commands, developing discipline, sustainable fitness habits before arriving is one of the clearest predictors of success at a service academy and beyond.
Well, you've already made it very clear, but I have to ask, what does a typical week look like for a cadet? I know there's definitely a lot of students and families that want to know. They might imagine it, but what does it look like for a cadet, and how does that experience differ from life at a traditional college?
Well, a lot different than what I went through, right? So I mean, that's one of my old curmudgeon ways. So my wife went to Boston College. Listening to her experience and my experience are totally different avenues in life. But all for the best, right? For what you're looking for in that environment. But a cadet life is very structured, from sunrise to lights out. A typical day blends military training, a full academic schedule, athletics, leadership responsibilities, and mandatory study hours. It's demanding, but it's also highly scrutinized, right? So everything is designed to develop you academically, physically, and as an officer at the same time, right? So we're all looking for it because you're getting ready for your job. Like when you graduate, we are going right into the workforce. So we need that kind of environment to develop you, right? So what truly sets the Coast Guard Academy apart is how integrated and purpose-driven the experience is. You're not just a student who does extracurriculars on the side. You're a student, you're an athlete, you're a military trainee, an emerging leader, all simultaneously, combined. There's very little unstructured time, but the environment is incredibly supportive and team-oriented. Students grow faster here than almost anywhere else because they're challenged and trusted every single day. So another major difference from a traditional college and even other service academies is the immediacy, and you kind of hinted towards that, John, right, of operational readiness, responsibility upon graduation. Coast Guard Academy graduates don't get an additional year of training before reporting to their units. I remember my older brother, when he graduated from Naval Academy, he had another year of specialty ops before he even went to flight school. Like I remember him doing that. So whereas we go straight into the fleet and we're becoming junior officers and there to make decisions, on risk-based decisions every day. So they're expected to be ready to join the fleet and stand the watch immediately, right? Often within days of commencement. Generally, we give you 30 days off. So I think some people feel like, I got to go there tomorrow. No, you've earned your leave. So I went to Europe when I graduated. So it was a good time. And that means every moment of their 200-week experience is what we call it here at the Academy. It matters. Even your summers are not breaks. So you only get 3 weeks off the summer. Unless you're a varsity athlete, you might only get 2 weeks off. They're extensions of the leadership and operational pipeline that you go through. So cadets spend their summers at active Coast Guard units, cutters, stations, and at air stations where we support and in many cases help perform real missions alongside active duty Coast Guard members. Search and rescue, aid to navigation, law enforcement patrols, environmental response. You're exposed early and often to the real work in the service. So this operational immersion is why the Academy schedule is so structured, right? And why the development process is so intentional. By the time cadets graduate, they're not just academically educated, they're professionally prepared, field tested, and ready to lead crews and stand critical watches from day one. So in short, Coast Guard Academy is designed to produce officers who are immediately operational. So the 200-week journey is packed with purpose, training, and responsibility. Every week builds towards the moment you step aboard your first unit and you're going to be ready to lead.
Well, we really appreciate that, Captain. And are there specific academic programs, leadership opportunities, or experiential learning experiences unique to the Coast Guard Academy? You mentioned so many, but I was wondering if there's more that applicants should understand before applying.
Absolutely, right? You're here to become a leader. And I think that's, very intentional, right? You're not here just to be a follower. Like we're going to ask you to go out there in the fleet. And so because we're such a very small, institution, cadets get hands-on experience very, very early. Whether that's in their STEM labs, their simulators, or operational training environments that we spoke of before, like during their summers, or leadership roles within the Corps of Cadets. Our 200-week program integrates academics, military training, and character and leadership development in a way that's unlike any civilian college, and especially if you ever go to BC. BC's great, but I can only talk about that because that's my wife's, alma mater, and maybe I'm just jealous of all the fun that she did have, there, but she didn't have some of the challenges and some of the fun that we got to experience. But one of the most, distinctive aspects of the Coast Guard Academy is how quickly our graduates step into real responsibility, right? While many other service academy graduates spend a year or more in a specialty or branch-specific training, we mentioned before going into their first unit, Coast Guard Academy graduates and our superintendent, he mentions this quite a bit, move directly into the operational leadership role. So we have to be ready, we have to be training. So the folks that we're going to guide out there, those, 200 plus that graduate every year, have to be ready, to step aboard and be force multipliers within their unit. So on day one, they're entrusted with leading people, managing resources, and making decisions that directly support the Coast Guard missions. That immediate transition to the frontline leadership is rare. And it's one of the defining opportunities that the Academy does offer. So for instance, when I graduated, I was sent to a cutter and immediately assigned as a deck watch officer and a boarding team member, entrusted to enforce laws on the high seas down in the Caribbean, and also I was out in the Pacific Ocean. as I got a chance to and do search and rescue missions within a month of graduation, right? I went to Europe first, but then we'll talk about that. But then I immediately, as soon as I stepped forward, we were getting underway and I had to get qualified. It was exhilarating and awesome knowing that, what the previous 4 years of like all that that crucible that I went through had prepared me to do this. And I was very excited to do it.
Wow, that's tremendous. And you talk about real world experiences. I don't think there's anything more real world than everything that you described. So thank you so much again, Captain Behnke. Katherine, back to you. Is there anything we haven't covered? And I know that we covered so much, but is there anything that we haven't covered that you think students considering the Coast Guard Academy should know before starting the application process?
Yeah, absolutely, John. I always tell students that they need to really, I mean, Captain talked about this at the beginning of the interview, but students really need to have a purpose for applying to the Coast Guard Academy. I was 2 years younger than my brother when he applied to the Coast Guard Academy and ultimately enrolled, and he really encouraged me to apply as well because he felt like we would be there together, it would be a great time. But I had the benefit of watching him for 2 years, and I saw just how rigorous, just how demanding. It is not a traditional college experience in many ways. Now, for some students, it's exactly what they're looking for. It's going to lead them. My brother has had an incredible career. The Coast Guard has taken him all over the world. He's lived in different parts of the country. He's had incredible jobs. He got a master's degree at Georgetown that the Coast Guard paid for. He's gotten so many incredible opportunities, but I knew that the experience that he was having wasn't going to be right for me. And so I did not want to take up one of those finite, very coveted spots at the academy when I knew that there were so many other people out there who were so dedicated and so committed to the idea of serving their country and to being there. And now it's thrilling for me to get to serve my country in this way, working in the admissions office and helping to select these future officers. But it's just really, really important that students are applying not because it sounds impressive, not because mom and dad would be so proud of them and want to see them do that, but because it's really a place that they want to be and they are excited and ready to serve. As Captain has mentioned, it is physically challenging, it's academically rigorous. I knew that calculus alone would take me out of the running for this experience, but it is a really demanding program. And so students have to know that this is what they're signing up for. And they're committing not just to this 4 year, 200-week journey, but to the 5 years after the fact. And for an 17, 18-year-old student, thinking about 9 years, that's half of the life they've lived so far, right? And so while we all know, us older and wiser folks know that when you're 25, 26, you're still very young when they finish that service commitment, but it is a commitment. And so we want students to just think about how they want their lives to look in the future, think about what they want out of a career. They don't have to know exactly what they want to do, but they have to know that they're making a commitment to something that is really special and really different and will reward them in many ways, but also won't look like what their best friend's college experience looks like or potentially their future spouse. And I knew that that wasn't the right fit for me, but I'm so, so fortunate to be able to help support students in navigating this choice. And so one of the things I'd really like to emphasize is Captain mentioned earlier our Academy Introductory Mission, our AIM program. That's a summer program that's specifically for rising high school seniors. So students just finishing up their junior year of high school in the February, March timeframe is when they would apply for that program. And it's a week-long summer program. We run 3 sessions of it every summer. And students really get to test drive what the Academy experience is all about. We have our cadre who are our second class cadets. They yell at the students. They have them run around campus. They treat them like they are swabs, which is what our first year students are called during the summer. And so they can really test it out. And there's 2 outcomes that we see as a success of that summer program. One is students saying, this is exactly what I want. This is what I thought it was going to be. I'm so excited to apply. And the other successful outcome is students saying, absolutely not. This is not for me. I'm not going to make it, because it's clarifying. It really helps the students to understand, is this something that they think they could commit to for 4 years? And so I highly encourage, if there are any students out there who are thinking about a service academy, who want to see if this is right for them, apply for a program like AIM or, another similar summer program, because you're really going to get to see if this is a good fit for you. And we take about 600 students every summer through our AIM program. And last year, around 55% of the students that we ended up enrolling, 50 to 55%, had attended our summer program. So we know that those students who attend the summer program, they get a real sense of what that academy experience is going to be like, and they end up really committing to that idea of applying and to being a student here, because they know what they're signing up for. And they're never fully prepared, even if they do come for AIM. It's still a bit of a shock to the system, but it at least helps students to really see if this might be a good fit for them. So I highly encourage that students, make sure that they're doing this for themselves, that this is something that they really want, and B, do their research, take all avenues, visit campus if you can, even better, come for a summer program. But it's the best way to see if this is the right path for you.
Such great advice. And of course, I'm going to put a link to the AIM program in the show notes. So for students and families that might be interested, please check the show notes for the link to the AIM program and so much more. Katherine and Captain, this has been phenomenal. Unfortunately, it does lead to that last question, which I'm going to ask both of you. We'll start with Katherine and then we'll end with Captain Behnke. If you could leave prospective applicants and their families with one or two more pieces of advice to help them determine if the Coast Guard Academy is the right fit, what would that be? Katherine?
Well, one thing, as a family member of someone who's been through the academy and who has served in the Coast Guard, one thing that I think is really important to know is that the Coast Guard really is a family service. It's very family oriented. And I think that parents who may have concerns about their child joining the military, maybe they don't come from a military background and they don't really understand this commitment. One thing I want them to know is that we have an incredible network both across the country, with our volunteers, with our Coast Guard officers who are stationed all over the country. But we have an incredible parents association at the Coast Guard Academy that has chapters all across the country. They do so many things for our cadets. We have local families in Connecticut who will be host families for cadets, so that if they can't make it home on a break or over a vacation, that they can stay with a local family. So there's a huge network, a huge support system. I mentioned that because my brother and I are close in age, I got to know a lot of his classmates. I've been to their weddings. They're some of my best friends. And so it really is, because it is a smaller service, it is really family oriented and really connected. So I think for some people who may not know what to expect going into a service academy, just know that there is a huge support system in place. We've spent a lot of time in this conversation talking about the rigor, the challenges, how difficult it might be. But I think it's also really important to emphasize the support system that we have in place, and just how much you gain from this experience. You have to give a lot, but you get so much in return. And so I just think that would be my advice, is just to know that there are so many really, really great and positive things. And as a family member of a former cadet and now a Coast Guard officer, I can really personally attest to that, even from the outside looking in.
Well, that sense of community and all that you get from being a part of it definitely resonated throughout this entire conversation. Katherine, I really can't thank you enough for being here and for sharing your expertise. Captain Behnke, same question for you, sir.
Well, Roger, well, I think, Katherine pretty much, hit it all. But I guess, the other things that I would probably highlight is be honest with yourself. And what is your why? I think the biggest question I always hear parents asking, and I know parents might be listening onto this podcast as well too, is you're always sitting there asking like your kiddo, where are you going? Where are you applying? Where is it? It's the wrong question. I think, the question that you really need to understand is first the why. Why are you seeking higher education? Whether it's a service academy or just another college, why is it you want to go? I think from there, then you figure out, if your wheres align with your whys. And so are you going there to have fun? Well, okay, yeah, you can have some fun here, but there's gonna be a lot more rigor and you're gonna gain 600 more parents, yelling at you, when you get here, through a time, and then you'll wean off. But it takes a lot of responsibility. So first, figure out your why. The Coast Guard Academy isn't just a 4-year, college. That's what, like Katherine, this is a job interview. You're getting ready to serve, out in 5 years, afterwards. So that's 9 years of your commitment. Everyone that comes in, I usually talk about they're 17 years old, right? And so like Katherine mentioned before, 9 years is more than half their life that they've already been. That's long ways out to see. And I would also say as you're looking into a college, where you're applying, think about more than just 4 years down the road. So I make fun of my wife with the Boston College, but she went there to become a nurse. So she knew when she was doing that, when she was graduating, she was going to become a nurse. That was really what her purpose and her why for going to school. So she set herself up for success that way. I knew I wanted to serve. I got very fortunate to be able to, one, go on a ship, but then become a helicopter pilot. And man, that, time of my life, I get to fly a desk now. I guess a little curmudgeon with that, but it was great when I get the opportunity to do that. And like Katherine had said, being the family oriented, my older brother, Naval Academy grad. I have a twin brother, smarter and better looking than I am, but he's in the Army right now. But different services, they're a lot bigger. And I think the Coast Guard, what we're able to give that advantage is the New York State Police Department, has 40,000 people. That's more than the entire Coast Guard has. One state police department. And so we are a small but mighty service, and so very family oriented. And I think the very last piece of advice I would give you is my kids, so I have very young kids, they're 7 and 9 as we do this podcast right now, but they watch Kung Fu Panda. And there's this brilliant, Katherine's heard me say this a couple of times, but Oogway, he's master. And he talks about this one thing he's saying is, yesterday is history, tomorrow's a mystery, and today's a gift. And that's why they call it the present. And I think we lose sight of looking to the future so much that enjoy what you're doing now. Enjoy the sports you're in. Enjoy the camaraderie with your friends in high school. It's almost going to be over with. Enjoy your time. And the more you enjoy it, the better successful you're going to be too. So don't lose sight of it. I know hey, we're all thinking about moving ahead, but enjoy your time that you have and enjoy the time you get to spend together. Because again, every day is a gift. And so, enjoy that. Not everyone gets to say that, but enjoy your time together. And we'll be looking forward to your application when it comes through, down the line. So I appreciate the time, John. This was fantastic, and look forward to hearing from you again.
Well, Captain Behnke, thank you so much. And I really appreciate at the end what you talked about. Enjoy. Families, do that as you research and find your way through the college process. And I have to say that I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I'm so happy because I know it's going to help so many students and their families as they navigate through this process. Captain Behnke, Katherine Fainer, thank you both so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, John. It was great.
Thanks, John. And go Coast Guard. Go Bears.
Our pleasure. And to everyone out there, good luck with the college search. Take care all, and best wishes. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the CAPT, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the CAPT. Thank you for listening to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success.